Have you ever wondered if living alone, especially later in life, it could be the most freeing chapter you never expected? For many men, that question doesn't arrive by choice. Sometimes it comes after a long marriage ends in divorce. Sometimes it comes after losing the woman you loved more than words could hold. And sometimes it comes when the kids are finally grown. The house is suddenly quiet. And you find yourself sitting at a dinner table with only one plate. At first, it feels heavy. The silence in the house is louder than the noise ever was. You hear your own footsteps echo down the hallway. And even something as simple as switching off the light feels unfamiliar. The holidays don't sound the same. The air feels different. There is an emptiness you didn't plan for. And you wonder if maybe this is what the rest of life will look like: quiet, lonely, and unfinished. But here's the truth I learned. Somewhere in that silence, something else begins to rise. It doesn't come quickly. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It appears slowly, quietly, like sunlight slipping across your table in the morning. At first you think you're losing something, but what you're really gaining is space. Space to breathe. Space to hear yourself think. Space to discover who you are again. That's why I want you to stay with me for a few minutes. Because what I'm about to share isn't theory. It's not a list of empty advice. It's a story about what happens when a man, in the later chapters of his life, suddenly finds himself alone. A story about fear. Yes, but more than that, a story about freedom, healing, and a kind of strength you may have forgotten you still carry. So, let me take you back to that first morning. I remember it like it was yesterday. The bed felt bigger. The house felt colder. And when I poured coffee into a single mug, it hit me that I wasn't pouring for anyone else anymore. For a moment, I almost couldn't drink it. The loneliness pressed down on me in a way I had never felt before. I turned on the television just to drown out the quiet. I let the news chatter fill the room. Music playing in the background. Anything to keep me from hearing that silence. But no matter how loud the TV was, I could still feel it. The absence. The stillness. It made me restless. It made me ache. But one morning, I did something different. I didn't turn the TV on. I just sat there, coffee in hand, staring at the steam as it curled and disappeared. For the first time, I let the silence be what it was. And something surprising happened. The quiet didn't feel like a punishment anymore. It felt like rest. It felt like a pause my soul had been asking for, but I never gave it. That was the moment everything began to shift. You see, when you spend decades being a provider, a husband, a father, your life becomes a rhythm built around everyone else. Your days are full, your nights are short, and your energy is stretched thin across all the people you love. But when that rhythm stops, when the house empties and the role you played so faithfully is no longer needed in the same way, you face a question you can't ignore. Who are you now? At first, I didn't know how to answer it. I felt useless, like I had stepped off the stage of my own life and the curtain had closed. But slowly, in that stillness, I realized the curtain wasn't closing. It was rising on a new scene. And the lead role, it was finally me. Not the husband. Not the father. Not the man who carried everyone else's needs. Just me. It started small. Sleeping in, until my body said it was time to wake up. Making breakfast the way I liked it, without worrying about anyone else's preferences. Leaving the dishes in the sink because I could, and because I knew I'd get to them when I felt like it. No one asking where I was going. No one wondering when I'd be back. For the first time in decades, my life was mine. And let me tell you something, that kind of freedom, it doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like healing. It feels like finally remembering that your time still belongs to you. I know men who have gone through the same thing. One friend of mine, a retired math teacher named Richard, told me about the first week after his divorce. The walls felt too close. He said, too quiet. But by the end of that week, he found himself sketching again. A hobby he hadn't touched since his 20s. He started playing old records in the living room, even dancing when no one was there to see. I didn't realize how much of myself I had packed away. He told me, living alone gave me the chance to hear myself again. That's what living alone can do. It takes away the noise, the distractions, the constant pull of responsibility. And it gives you back something you thought you lost forever yourself. Now, I won't pretend it's easy. There are nights when the silence still feels sharp. There are mornings when you wish someone was there to share a laugh, or a meal, or just the comfort of being nearby. But in those moments, I remind myself that this space is not empty. It is full of possibilities I had ignored for too long, because in the quiet, I began to notice things again. The way the leaves rustled outside my window, the creak of the old wooden floor as I walked across it, the sound of my own breath in the cold air of a winter morning. These weren't just small details. They were invitations, gentle reminders that I was still here, still alive, still capable of being moved by simple beauty. And maybe, just maybe, for that's the greatest lesson living alone has taught me so far. Loneliness and freedom can arrive in the same room, but it's up to me which one I pay attention to. So, if you're listening to this and you found yourself in that quiet place, wondering if it's the end of something or the beginning, I want to tell you it can be both. It can be an ending, yes, but it can also be a beginning disguised as silence. And that's where my story really starts. When the silence stopped feeling like an enemy, I began to see my days differently. At first, it was simple things. I noticed the freedom in choosing how my morning unfolded. I did not need to hurry to get dressed or rush out the door. The clock no longer dictated who I needed to be. I could sit with my coffee as long as I wanted. I could let the sun climb higher in the sky before I even thought about leaving the house. For the first time in years, there was no one expecting me to be anywhere but where I already was. That kind of freedom does not roar. It whispers. It tells you in the quietest voice that you are still allowed to enjoy your own rhythm. Slowly, I started making changes in my home. Not big, expensive renovations, but small shifts that made the space feel like mine again. I moved a chair closer to the window where the afternoon sun landed. I placed photos on the wall, not to impress anyone, but because they meant something to me. I kept the books I actually read, and I let go of the ones collecting dust for years. Little by little, my home stopped feeling like a reminder of absence. It started to feel like a reflection of who I was becoming. I had a friend, Leo, who went through something similar after his wife passed. He moved into a modest two-bedroom house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but he told me that for the first time, he felt a sense of ownership over his space. He hung up pictures from his Navy days. I set his old recliner by the window and kept a small radio playing country tunes. When I visited him, he smiled and said, "No one else would decorate like this, but everything in here makes sense to me." That is what I learned too. Living alone means your home does not have to impress anyone. It just has to hold you. And when it does, it whispers back, "You still matter here." But it was not just about rearranging furniture or finding comfort in four walls. Living alone gave me the chance to rediscover who I was beneath all the roles I used to play. For decades, I had been the provider, the problem solver, the one who kept the family running. Then, when those roles fell away, I had to ask myself a question I had not asked in years. What do I enjoy? At first, I did not know the answer. My evenings felt empty, like I was walking through a space I did not recognize. But then one night, I pulled a book off the shelf. A book on philosophy I had bought years ago but never touched. I read a few pages, then a few more. Something about those words stirred something inside me. The next day, I picked up a journal and started writing again. Soon after, I bought a used camera and began walking to the river near my house, taking pictures of the sunrise. It was not about creating masterpieces. It was about feeling alive again, about remembering there was more to me than the titles I carried. And in that rediscovery, I found a kind of joy I thought I had outgrown. I will be honest. There were times I worried about money too. Years of raising a family, paying mortgages, handling emergencies. They had stretched every paycheck thin. But now, living on my own, I realized I did not need much. Downsizing was not losing. It was letting go of what no longer fit my life. I sold the big house that once held a family. I let go of rooms that sat empty. In that choice, I found relief. I did not have to chase anything anymore. I did not have to spend money to prove success or keep up appearances. What I had was enough. A comfortable chair. A stocked fridge. A little left for the hobbies I loved. That was freedom. And for the first time, I bought something just for me, without guilt. A fishing rod I had always wanted. It was not about the price. It was about what it symbolized. A permission to take care of myself. And then there was the healing that came to my mind. For years, I carried the weight of everyone's expectations. I worked to keep people happy, to hold everything together, to make sure no one felt neglected. In doing so, I forgot what peace felt like. Living alone reminded me I could walk through my mornings without someone measuring my worth by what I had done. I could sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and not feel rushed. I could breathe in a way I had not in years. That was when I noticed something surprising. My sleep improved. My shoulders did not feel as tight. My thoughts, once scattered, started to come back to center. I was not just existing anymore. I was mending. And in that healing, relationships began to look different too. When I saw people, when my grown children visited, or a friend called, I was not drained by obligation. I was grateful. Those moments meant more because they were not constant. They were chosen, intentional, and real. I did not need a crowd. I just needed a few hearts that still made room for mine. It was then that I realized something important. Living alone does not mean living without connection. It means refining the connections you have, letting them deepen in ways you never thought possible. A short phone call could carry me for days. A handwritten letter felt like treasure. Time apart made time together more meaningful. Still, the biggest change came in the way I saw myself. At first, living alone made me doubt my abilities. Could I handle it all? Could I fix what needed fixing? Manage bills. Remember my medications. Keep up with life. Some days I fumbled. Yes, I struggled with jars that would not open, with technology that would not cooperate. But with every small victory, I felt something stirring again. Confidence. Not the bold, loud confidence of youth, but a steadier, wiser kind. I realized I could stand on my own 2 feet, not because I had to prove it to anyone, but because I still could. That discovery became a quiet source of strength. And then came the moment of clarity, the climax of this whole journey. One morning, sitting at my kitchen table, I whispered the words out loud. I am not lonely. I am free. I am alive. It hit me like a wave. The silence I once feared had become my companion. The solitude I resisted had become my strength. What once felt like an ending now felt like a beginning I never saw coming. And that was when I knew. This chapter of living alone was not something to endure. It was something to embrace. When I spoke those words aloud, I am not lonely. I am free. I am alive. Something inside me shifted forever. It was as if the silence I once feared had finally revealed its true purpose. It was not there to punish me. It was there to give me back what I had lost. From that moment on, the ordinary parts of life began to feel extraordinary. The smell of coffee drifting through my kitchen in the early morning, the golden light of the sun reaching across the floorboards, the steady rhythm of rain tapping on the roof at night. None of these things had changed. But I was finally still enough to notice them. And in noticing, I found joy. There was a time when I believed joy came from big milestones, promotions, anniversaries, family gatherings, goals achieved. But living alone taught me that joy can be found in the smallest moments. Planting a tomato in the backyard and watching it grow. Hearing a favorite song on the radio while driving with the window down. Sitting by the fire on a winter evening. Feeling the warmth spread across the room. These were not grand achievements. They were simple. The quiet reminders that I was still here and still living. I began to understand that life is not only measured by the people who fill your home, but also by the way you fill your own time. That realization lifted a weight from my shoulders. I no longer needed constant activity or endless conversation to feel alive. I needed presence. I needed to open my eyes and see what was already around me. Some friends asked if I ever felt lonely. The truth is, yes. There are moments of loneliness. A holiday when the house feels too quiet. A birthday when I wish there were more voices singing. But I discovered something important. Loneliness is not the opposite of peace. Sometimes they arrive together. Sometimes they even teach each other. Loneliness reminds me that I am human, still capable of feeling. Peace reminds me that I am safe. It's still capable of healing. Together, they form a balance that makes life real. Living alone has also changed the way I see my own strength. At first, I questioned if I could manage everything, paying bills, cooking meals, keeping up with the small details of daily life. But with time, I found pride in doing those things on my own. They became reminders that I was still capable. Each task, no matter how small, it became a victory. Fixing a leaky faucet, cooking a meal exactly how I liked it, taking a long walk without needing anyone else to join. These acts built confidence quietly, but steadily. It is easy to think that growing older means losing independence, but what I learned is that independence can return in a new form. Not rushed, not loud, but steady and sure. It is not about proving yourself to the world anymore. It is about proving to yourself that you are still here, still capable, and still strong. Something else changed too. The way I connected with others became deeper. I no longer filled my calendar with obligations. Instead, I welcomed the connections that felt true. A call from my daughter, a lunch with an old friend, a neighbor waving from across the street. Each one carried weight. Each one reminded me that relationships are not measured by how often they happen, but by how genuine they feel. In many ways, living alone has made my relationships stronger. There is more space to listen, more patience to understand, more gratitude for every word spoken. When people show up now, I do not take it for granted. I see it as a gift, not an expectation. I sometimes think about the man I was when I first sat down in that empty house. Confused, restless, afraid of the silence pressing in on me. If I could speak to him now, I would tell him, do not be afraid. This is not the end. This is a beginning you do not yet recognize. I would tell him that the quiet will not break you. It will build you. I would tell him that you will discover parts of yourself that you had buried for years, that you will find strength in making your own choices again, that you will rediscover joy in the smallest details of life, that the silence you fear will one day feel like a friend. And I would remind him that living alone does not mean living without meaning. It means choosing meaning in new ways. The greatest gift of this chapter is clarity. When the house is quiet, when the demands of the world soften, you begin to see what truly matters. You stop chasing what you no longer need. You start holding on to what you cannot live without. Peace, freedom, authentic connection, small joys that keep the heart alive. So tonight, as I sit here in the soft glow of a lamp, I look around my space. It is simple. A chair that fits me just right. A shelf with books I love. A framed picture of my children when they were young. Music playing softly from a radio in the corner. This is not emptiness. This is enough. And I think about tomorrow. Maybe I will rise early to watch the sun come up. Maybe I will call my son and ask how his week has been. Maybe I will take a long walk by the river and capture a photo of the light on the water. None of it is planned. None of it is expected. That is the beauty of it. Living alone, at this stage of life, is not a failure. It is not an ending. It is a different kind of freedom, a softer strength, a gentler joy. It is the chance to write the last chapters of your story not with noise, but with meaning. So, if you are listening to this and you find yourself in a quiet home, unsure of what it means, let me say this to you. Do not see it only as loss. See it as space. Space to heal. Space to rediscover yourself. Space to choose what matters now. Because in the end, living alone does not have to mean being alone. It can mean being free. It can mean being whole. And it can mean finally living for yourself. Fully and without apology. And maybe, tonight, instead of filling the silence with noise, you will sit with it. Maybe you will light a candle, open a window, breathe a little slower, and for a moment, feel the quiet strength of being exactly where you are.